Hola mis amores, welcome back to another video. My name is Vanessa. About 2 weeks ago on my TikTok, I posted a video on the books that have radically changed me, have sort of informed and shaped my politics. It was a video about all of the books that I have read in university as a human rights student. If you're new here, I did go to school for political science. That was my major, but my minor was in human rights. As a result, I have come across and have read quite a bit of human rights literature. Now, I did want to share that video on all of my different platforms, but understandably, that video was quite long and I couldn't share it on YouTube as a shorts or on Instagram as a reel. So I thought to myself that maybe I should make a long form video sharing once again all of the books that have really transformed me as a person in terms of my politics. These are books that have left a tremendous impact on me, and they're also books that I can never stop thinking about or that I will always recommend. I do want to give a massive trigger warning. All of the books in today's video are incredibly dark, understandably so, and all of the books for the most part tackle genocide and war and conflict and human rights abuses. This is what you would call human rights literature. So I feel like if you are a social justice advocate, this video definitely is for you. If you consider yourself to be anti-genocide, anti-war, or maybe you're currently studying human rights, gender studies, international relations, I feel like if you fall under that umbrella, this video definitely is for you. Although I will say most likely if you fall under any of those categories, you have come across some of the books that I'm going to recommend today. Either way, I wanted to put this video out there because human rights literature is something that I'm always going to read. And these are all books that are very important to me, my politics. So without further ado, let's get into the list. These are all of the books that have fundamentally transformed me and have shaped and informed my politics. So the first set of books that I want to recommend are all on the same topic, and that would be Palestine. Now, if you do want to learn more on what's currently happening in Palestine, or you want to read more about Palestinian history, there are 4 books that I would start with. 10 Myths About Israel. This one is by Ilan Pappe. The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. This one is also by Ilan Pappe. On Palestine by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappe. And The 100 Years War on Palestine. This one is by Rashid, Khalidi. All of these books are a really good starting point for understanding the history of Palestine, both before the Nakba, during the Nakba, and also understanding the ongoing occupation of the Palestinian territories. All of these books disrupt the myth that Israel came into existence naturally. Israel is predicated on the displacement, the expulsion, and the genocide of hundreds and thousands of Palestinians. And this was done as a matter of planned, deliberate policy and settler colonialism. Again, these are all an excellent starting point. I think when it comes to Palestine, there's so many different opinions and there's so many different frameworks that some of these thinkers operate within. And I think when you're reading these books, you may not agree with every single point that's being made in terms of how do we get to Palestinian liberation, right? What does that look like? But I think that fundamentally they all believe the same thing, which is Israel is a settler colonial project. And ultimately all of these thinkers believe in the decolonization, right, of the Palestinian territories. I say that to say you're not always going to be super aligned with each and every thinker that you read. So engage with these books critically, but I do think that they're an excellent starting point when it comes to Palestine. Now, I would read those 4 books, but I would read them in tandem with Edward Said's Orientalism. I remember reading Orientalism twice in university. Both times it was a very intimidating, challenging read. Edward Said is one of my favorite thinkers, and if you consider yourself to be a student of human rights or a social justice advocate, you need to be reading Edward Said. Read anything by Edward Said, okay? Again, Orientalism is a very challenging piece of literature, piece of text. So I do recommend starting with his articles or his essays to sort of get your feet wet with his thinking and his writing style. But Orientalism is one of my favorite books of all time. This absolutely revolutionized political thought. In the 1970s, university departments were trying to initiate some form of post-colonial studies, but they did not have the language or the tools or the knowledge, and specifically the language to be able to critically analyze the West. They weren't able to critically analyze all of the reasons why the West did what it did. And that's where Edward Said came along. He really is the founder of post-colonial studies as we now know it. Now, Orientalism specifically is all about how the West constructed the East. The West constructed the East as an object of both study and intrigue, fantasy and control. The West had to essentially create the East as an other, this very fantastical, almost mythical, exotic other that they considered backwards and mysterious. The West positioned themselves as being innovative and rational, and they positioned the East as this backward society that essentially needed to be saved from its very primitive origins. And so Edward Said talks about how that construction, the ways that the West constructed the East, would go on to justify the need for imperialism and colonialism and the ongoing dehumanization of Arab people, the Middle East, and Muslims overall. Now, Orientalism is specifically concerned with the Middle East, but I find that the information can be applied to numerous different histories and numerous different communities, right? Because even when you look at colonization in Africa, the Portuguese, they considered the indigenous people of Africa, they considered them to be very mythical. They thought that Africans were these very mythical creatures. They had like one eye, horns coming out of their head, tails growing behind their backs, sort of thing. And so that would justify the need for them to come over and import all of these colonial structures and colonize all of these territories. And so Orientalism can really explain so much. And I feel like this is foundational, essential reading. It's very seminal. And Edward Said is just so influential. As a thinker, he's very intimidating, yes, but he is so profound. He is so intelligent. He is one of my favorite intellects. He's just amazing. Read anything by Edward Said. So Orientalism is another book that has stuck with me for a very long time. I had to pick up my own physical copy, and I'm so happy that I have it on my bookshelf. When it comes to anti-racist literature, one of the thinkers that has stuck with me for a very long time is Frantz Fannon. Now, The Wretched of the Earth isn't a book that I read in university from start to finish. I actually just read excerpts from The Wretched of the Earth. In addition, I read a lot of articles and essays by Frantz Fannon. So I did read a fair bit of Frantz Fannon. I just never got to read The Wretched of the Earth from start to finish. So now, as an adult, I was like, yes, I need a copy of this book on my bookshelf. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Frantz Fannon, aside from being a revolutionary and anti-colonial thinker, theorist, he was also a psychiatrist, and he used his medical knowledge to truly examine the impact of colonization and how colonization and racism truly shapes the mind, body, and soul. His work is incredibly foundational because he makes the case that simply changing who governs a country, changing governmental structures, is not enough to dismantle the systems that colonization has left behind. And also, because his work exists at the intersection of mental health and colonization, he really examines the deep psychological trauma that colonization and racism has left behind. So yes, he's incredibly foundational because he's not simply saying that colonization is bad. He is instead making the link between mental health and colonialism. And he talks about all of the ways that colonized people have internalized the white gaze, self-subjugation, like colonized people truly believe that they are inferior because we inherit a colonial identity. And truly, we need to tackle and have conversations on mental health as it relates to colonialism if we want to achieve true collective liberation. So he is just so fantastic. Another thinker that, yes, is very intimidating to get into. So try his articles, try his essays, but Frantz Fannon is a thinker that has stuck with me for a very long time and one that I do recommend reading. In the same vein, another piece of anti-racist literature that has stuck with me is Black Feminist Thought. This one is by Patricia Hill Collins, and her work is so foundational, very important. Another piece of literature that I recommend reading. Black Feminist Thought is incredibly intersectional, right? But she doesn't just regurgitate all of the intersectional feminist work that preceded her. She actually advances the conversation and she advances the ideals of intersectional feminism. And she talks really about the matrix of domination and the idea that multiple identities can not only intersect, but they also overlap, and how they function can change from environment to environment. So yes, if you want to read about Black feminist thought, read Bell Hooks, read Audre Lorde, read Angela Davis, but also read Patricia Hill Collins. That is a name that I don't feel like gets brought up a lot. And I remember reading Black feminist thought quite a bit. And it's one of those books that has stayed with me. Again, she really advances the conversation on intersectionality. It is not surface level at all. It is very profound. Nowadays, when it comes to contemporary nonfiction, there's a lot of books that tackle intersectionality and Black feminist thought. But you have to read essential foundational literature when it comes to these things. And Patricia Hill Collins is a wonderful place to start. So that would be all of the anti-racist literature that I wanted to talk about today. Moving on, I want to recommend Hannah Arendt. Read anything from Hannah Arendt, okay? She is another one of my favorite thinkers. Eichmann in Jerusalem is just groundbreaking. Hannah Arendt was a German Jewish refugee. I believe that she fled Europe either before the war or during the war. And after the war, she actually attended the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem. Adolf Eichmann was actually one of the key principal architects of the Holocaust. He was in charge of the mass deportations of Jewish and other persecuted communities to death camps, to concentration camps. He was very involved in all of it, if not one of the principal architects. And so after World War II, he was put on trial for all of the war crimes that he committed, and Hannah Arendt attended that trial. And of course, she had some key observations. In Eichmann in Jerusalem, that's where we get the banality of evil, which is the idea that people who are committing all of these war crimes are not necessarily inherently evil. They commit these war crimes due to thoughtlessness, which is an absence of critical reflection and an absence of an internal moral dialogue. So that's essentially Eichmann in Jerusalem. I am summarizing quite a bit. I highly recommend reading Eichmann in Jerusalem. In general, Hannah Arendt is just fantastic. Her theory on thoughtlessness, yes, but also her theory on statelessness and how that can help us understand the current prison industrial complex or places like Guantanamo Bay, Abu Ghraib. I mean, there is so much that we can take away from Hannah Arendt, and she is someone that, again, if you're into human rights, consider yourself a social justice advocate, she should be someone that you should be reading. Sticking with World War II and also the Holocaust, there is a graphic novel that has stuck with me for quite some time, and that would be Mouse. This one is by Art Spiegelman. In Mouse, he is having a conversation with his parents who survived the horrors of Auschwitz, and the book really explores memory and survival, and also it explores all of the ways that intergenerational trauma is passed down due to war and conflict and genocide as well. Another similar book to that one, but it is a novel, would be Night by Elie Wiesel, and that was another book that really stuck with me that we read in university. So those would be two fantastic World War II books that I recommend reading. Moving along, if you want to learn more about genocide and war crimes, one of the darkest books in this video for sure is The Rape of Nanking. The international community now knows that some horrific stuff happened in Nanjing. There were some serious atrocities committed by the Japanese Imperial Army. They invaded and conquered the city of Nanjing, and they just committed some of the most horrifying atrocities that you can ever imagine. The Rape of Nanking, it is a book that I have on my bookshelf, but it's a book that will forever haunt me. It will definitely haunt you as well. Take care of yourself when you read this one. The things that you will read about, again, just defy human logic. Some horrible things were committed by the Japanese Imperial Army, but it's another book, you know, that explores genocide and war crimes that I do recommend reading. Another book that is in that same vein would be We Wish to Inform You That Tomorrow We Will Be Killed. This one is about the Rwandan genocide. As we all know, in the matter of 3 months, almost 1 million Tutsi Rwandans were killed, mutilated in their own country. And this book in particular is about the Rwandan genocide, but it's told through the perspective of the people who lived it. And it's also about the mechanics of mass killing and also about international inaction. This was fantastic. I do want my own physical copy. The other day, I actually went to the thrift store and I picked up Machete Season, The Killers in Rwanda Speak. So this is all about the Rwandan genocide, but it's told through the perspective of the people who did the killing. I didn't read this in university, but I found it at the thrift store and I was like, hey, I do want to have more literature about the Rwandan genocide on my bookshelf. So I picked this one up as well. And then I also recommend First They Killed My Father. This is about the Cambodian genocide. And I think that when we discuss genocides, the Cambodian genocide is often forgotten or not spoken about as much. But the Cambodian genocide took the lives of 25% of Cambodia's population, and it was equally as brutal and horrific and horrifying. This is essentially an anti-war memoir, if you will. It is by human rights activist Luang Ung. She survived the genocide. Her father did not, but she was trained as a child soldier and also sent to labor camps. Her siblings were also sent to labor camps as well. This was a phenomenal memoir. It's one of my favorite memoirs of all time. Yes, it's very heavy and there are a lot of graphic details, of course. So it is very heavy, but it's an excellent, phenomenal memoir that I recommend that everybody read. And the movie adaptation on this book is also really, really good. Also, I do want to recommend My Name is Light. This one is by Elsa Osorio, and this one is about Argentina's dirty war. You may already know that during the 1970s until the early to mid 1980s, Latin America experienced a wave of military dictatorships, and Argentina was not immune to this. And so in Argentina, the military dictatorship, they really depended and relied on state-sanctioned violence and terror. And there were all of these secret police forces, and all of these detention camps were set up all over the country. And at these detention camps, political prisoners or political opponents were routinely tortured and then eventually killed. And so My Name is Light is a fictional book, yes, but it is based on the true events of so many different people. Our main character is essentially trying to uncover the truth about her identity, because some of these political opponents that were kidnapped, tortured, and eventually killed, some of these political opponents were pregnant women, and they would often give birth in captivity. And so the logical question is, what happened to all of these babies? These babies were often gifted and given and adopted by the very same people that carried out the torture. So all of these police officers and commanders, they would come home with all of these babies that did not belong to them. They were the babies of the people that they were torturing, and they would raise these babies as their own. And so that is exactly what the book is about. Our main character is trying to uncover her true identity and the circumstances that led to the death of her biological parents. She's being raised by a family that was heavily involved in the torture and the kidnapping and the killing of so many people that disappeared during Argentina's dirty war. The people that were made to disappear are often referred to as los desaparecidos, or the disappeared. And there's so many documentaries out there on mothers and grandmothers who are really trying to piece together what actually happened to their loved ones. A lot of family members until today are living without answers, right, as to what happened to their loved ones. It is a phenomenal book. It is really good. I do recommend reading it. And this is a book that I recommend for casual leisure reading, right? It reads like a, contemporary fiction book. I remember reading it in university, and it has stayed with me for a very long time. And last but not least, let's switch gears a little bit to Judith Butler. When it comes to gender, she is one of my favorite thinkers, favorite gender theorists, gender historians. Judith Butler was very influential in developing the idea that gender is performative. Gender is something that we perform or act out through a series of repeated actions. Gender is not a fixed identity. We know that it's fluid, it's ever so changing. So read anything by Judith Butler. I recommend Who's Afraid of Gender, but we read a fair bit of Judith Butler, especially her articles and her essays as well. All right, so those are all the books that I recommend in terms of human rights literature, and those are all of the books that I read in university. Well, not all, but those are the books that have stayed with me for a very long time, and that off the top of my head I can name and I can recommend. So I do hope that this was useful, that you took something away from this video. Maybe it triggers a memory for you as well if you have read any of these books, or maybe they're new books that you want to add to your TBR for further reading, further research, and further understanding. So I do want to thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Adios.